We've been studying the five great virtues or sadharana dharmas taught in Hinduism, popular Hinduism. According to our list, these five cardinal virtues are purity, self control, detachment, truth, and non violence. Quite similar, quite close to Patanjali's list of five virtues. Last week, we were exploring the meaning of detachment. In the course of our explanation, or towards the end of it, we learned something surprising from Swami Vivekananda's inspiring passage where he makes clear the difference between love and attachment or selfishness, and the relationship between love and detachment. On the one hand, we have love and attachment, that is, attachment going in the name of love, and on the other, we have love and detachment. On reading that passage, it became clear to us that only spiritual people who had no worldly attachments, who were persons of detachment, only they would be able to love other people. Where there is attachment, there is selfishness, and where there is selfishness, there cannot be love. Whereas detached people, even though they don't appear to love others, it is only they who can really love. Detachment is, by definition, freedom from attachment to earthly things. We are all generally attached to our possessions, families, friends, and relations. In fact, to all to which our feelings of I, me, and mine are attached. We cling to everything that we think of as ours. So it goes without saying that our own bodies and minds are two things to which we are most attached. These are two which we hold to be our dearest. If you remember, we heard that detachment included detachment also from one's own ideas and opinions, not only external things. So, what did I mean by saying that? To be detached from one's own ideas and opinions. We in this little group, we are all spiritual aspirants. And given enough spiritual aspiration, there are many among us who probably can get over their attachment to possessions, relations, and friends. But even for such people, even for spiritual aspirants, it is not easy to get over their detachment, get over their attachment to their own opinions and sometimes prejudices, because these are all creatures of our own minds. It's a very strong, though subtle form of ahankar or egotism. If I want to be truly spiritual, then I'll have to cultivate a certain detachment from even from my own mind. I'll have to learn to be above my own mind, or at least try to rise above the demands of my lower self. learn not to overly identify myself with even the most dearly cherished schemes of my heart. That means I ought to have detachment enough to consider all sides of an issue, learn to have no interests other than those of truth. If we are in search of God, if we are on the path of Dharma, if our sole concern is the discovery of truth, then as spiritual aspirants, we should have no interest other than that which will deflect us from our main concern. Whatever my opinions, whether these are opinions that I am born with, what I've inherited from my previous existences, or whether I have acquired them in my present birth, whatever stands between me and and the truth that I want to reach, I should have enough clarity of vision to recognize those obstacles, those mental obstacles, and then have the strength to brush them aside. It's not at all easy, but for people who have started early in life, for such people at least, the work should be less painful. If I have cultivated the habit of detachment from the beginning of my spiritual life, it doesn't become too difficult. So we must always keep in mind that as followers of Dharma, our foremost concern is the discovery of truth. That brings us to the next cardinal virtue, the fourth virtue, truth itself. Truthfulness is a virtue that all religions, even the not so well developed religions, the so-called primitive religions, inculcate. In all Hindu scriptures, truthfulness is constantly spoken of as the very basis of character. So what exactly is truthfulness? We think it is a very simple thing, and of course it is. Truth is, by the simplest definition, truth is what is opposed to falsehood, that's all. But according to the definition that we find in Vedanta books, truthfulness consists in the correspondence of thought and speech to the objective fact. I repeat, truthfulness consists in the correspondence of thought and speech to the objective fact. So, if we want to practice truthfulness, we have to fulfill two conditions. First, the fact must be ascertained by some proof, some valid proof. A valid proof means something that will be accepted by people in general, not something that I produce as proof whimsically. And secondly, that fact has to be faithfully described without any intentional deceit, without any motive to mislead the hearer, and without the use of unnecessary words that could divert his attention away from the main point. First of all, truthfulness is the correspondence of thought and speech to an objective fact that is established by proof. And that fact has to be ascertained or be ascertainable by others. Secondly, all this has to be faithfully described without any intentional deceit or unnecessary words. So, direct, plain, and simple. According to the Shastras, half-truths or evasions are as good as lies because they're ways of concealing the truth. So, according to the Shastras, neither of these two, half-truths and evasions, can be accepted as truth. But all this, what we have heard until now, all this is only one half of the practice of truthfulness. That is, a faithful description of fact. But we are talking about truthfulness as a virtue. Truthfulness, in order to be a virtue, must not hurt or injure others. In the name of being direct, plain, and simple, people go about hurting others. Our purpose in speaking the truth must be the welfare of others. But when such a purpose is not served, the Shastras say it is wise to remain silent. The way they see it, the Shastras, what is good has to be true, and what is true has to be good. A well-known Sanskrit verse, probably most of you will have heard of it before. This verse says, "Speak the truth, speak the pleasant, but never speak an unpleasant truth, nor a pleasant untruth." Even Holy Mother Sarada Devi used to say, one must never speak an unpleasant truth. So speak the truth, speak the pleasant, but never speak an unpleasant truth, nor a pleasant truth. Because sometimes just in order to be nice to somebody, we say something that is not true. So this is how difficult the practice of truthfulness is. Actually, when we begin to practice it seriously, then we see that it actually includes a number of other virtues. Truthfulness includes honesty, sincerity, faithfulness. And if, as followers of Dharma, truthfulness means it's being open. It means having a spirit of inquiry and investigation in order to find the truth. A sense of fairness in our dealings, and even our appreciation of beauty. I don't mean beauty in the physical sense, but higher forms of beauty. All these are only different facets of truth. They are all allied virtues. In fact, according to the Shastras, all virtues, everything that is good and beautiful and auspicious, all of them are only different forms of truth. But we'll come to this point just a little later. In the Mahabharata, we read, there is no duty higher than truth, and no sin more dreadful than untruth. Indeed, truth is the very root of righteousness. Therefore, one should never compromise with truth. Holy Mother used to say, a person who holds to truthfulness steadfastly has nothing to fear. Such a person sits in the lap of God. We know about great characters like Harishchandra and Yudhishthira from the Ramayana and Mahabharata. What colossal sacrifices these great heroes made to keep their promises. They were both great kings, but they gave away their kingdoms. They had to sell their families, and they agreed to be slaves, all to fulfill the promises they had made. And even their families agreed to be sold. This shows what strength of character these two people had, Harishchandra and Yudhishthira. Yes, I may sell myself, but my descendants may not, but my dependents may not agree with me. They may not agree to be sold to others with me. But if I have enough purity of character, if my character is strong, if my thoughts, words have thoughts and words and my external actions have matched, then nobody will be able to resist what I say. So that is the kind of force of character that these two people had, Harishchandra and Yudhishthira. It is said Harishchandra was such a truthful person that he had never lied in his life. That is why he is called Satyavadi, one who always speaks the truth. And Yudhishthira is somewhat better known than Harishchandra because he is the eldest of the 5 Pandavas, the Pandava brothers of the Mahabharata. He is called Dharmaraja, the king of Dharma. It all shows the high place given to truth in Hinduism. Not only these 2 examples, many such other examples can be seen in our Itihasas and Puranas. And in our own time, we have the shining example of Sri Ramakrishna, who held truth above everything, who was the very personification of truthfulness. He used to say, truthfulness alone constitutes the spiritual discipline of the Kali Yuga. If a person clings tenaciously, that is, steadfastly, without giving up, if a person clings tenaciously to truth, he ultimately realizes God. Sri Ramakrishna says, we don't have to do anything else. And he adds, without this regard for truth, one gradually loses everything. This we see all around us. We think, yeah, a white lie doesn't really matter. But what happens is when we tell a so-called white lie once, it becomes easier for us to do that the next time, and slowly, unknown to ourselves, we go down and down in spiritual life. Sri Ramakrishna says, if by chance I say that I'll go to the pine grove, I must go there even if there is no further need of it, lest I lose my attachment to truth. You know what he meant by the pine grove? Pine grove was a secluded spot in the Dakshineshwar temple garden complex where Sri Ramakrishna used to go to answer calls of nature. So, if he by chance happened to say that he wanted to go there, then he had to go there even if he didn't really feel like going there. Why? Because he was afraid that his devotion to truth may be diluted. After my vision of the Divine Mother, Sri Ramakrishna says, after my vision of the Divine Mother, I prayed to her, taking a flower in my hands. Mother, here is thy knowledge, and here is thy ignorance. Take them both, and give me only pure love. Here is thy holiness, here is thy unholiness. Take them both, Mother, and give me pure love. Here is thy good, and here is thy evil. Take them both, Mother, and give me pure love. Here is thy righteousness, and here is thy unrighteousness. Take them both, Mother, and give me pure love. In the end, he says, I mentioned all these, that is, knowledge and ignorance, holiness, unholiness, good and evil, dharma and adharma. Take everything, but I mentioned all these, but I could not say, Mother, here is thy truth and here is thy falsehood. Take them both. I gave up everything at her feet, but could not bring myself to give up truth. Because if I gave up truth, what shall I hold on to in life? This is what Sri Ramakrishna said. Just a while ago, I said according to the Shastras, all virtues, everything that Sri Ramakrishna has mentioned in that prayer, I mean the positive aspects of that, they are all only different forms of truth. So, truth doesn't mean mere truthfulness. In our case, it also means what is right in personal conduct, what is just and fair in our social dealings, what is true in the knowledge that we seek. Right conduct, fair dealings, and true knowledge. All this are included in truth and truthfulness. We have already heard it several times that dharma is nothing but a progressive search after truth. If that is the case, then it is as much a quest after right conduct, just dealing, and true knowledge. Because God is truth. God is reality. What is reality? Reality is what really actually exists, and that is truth. So God as truth is the source of all righteousness, all justice, all knowledge, and also all beauty. These are eternal values, Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram. Everything that is real, Satya. Everything that is Shiva, that is auspicious. Everything that is good. And everything that is Sundaram, that is beautiful. It is only the temporal phases of these three values, Satyam, Shivam, and Sundaram. It is only their temporal phases that we see in our world. On the contrary, sin, ugliness. Ugliness means ugliness of the soul. Injustice, ignorance. These are all forms of untruth. These are all mere shadows without any substance. So what dharma implies by satya is not mere truthfulness. It is also our active support. See, dharma is not a negative affair. It is not a passive affair. Dharma requires our active involvement. So we must be active in our support of correct views. We must stand up for just causes. We must do the right actions. And we must have an appreciation for beautiful ways of life, appreciation for goodness and beauty in all their aspects. Now we see what a great virtue truth is. Truth is a virtue that opens the door to infinite progress in science, art, morality, and ethics, because these are all parts, different phases of our pursuit of truth on the path of dharma. Now, progress in art and science we can understand. But do ethics and morality also progress? Do we not already know what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong? What progress could there be in these matters? So how are we to understand that progress of morality and ethics? Does it mean there'll be something like a higher ethics or a higher form of morality sometime in the future? Is it something hypothetical? Or will such a thing be real and achievable? Of course, morality is a thing of growth that we have already seen during our study of the concept of swadharma. Just as our intellectual capacities grow, just as our artistic faculties develop through training, our moral sensibilities can also be made finer and finer. In fact, real growth is, as far as human beings are concerned, real growth is not just mental growth, but moral and spiritual development. Really speaking, this is what makes the difference between one person and another. Swami Vivekananda said, the difference between one person and another is the difference between their characters. So, we have already seen in our study of Swadharma that the nature of dharma is relative. It varies from person to person. It changes according to each individual's mental and moral development. A person's humanness is directly proportional to their moral nature. The higher I am in morality, the more human I am. The more moral one is, the more human one is. And after all, what is society? It is nothing but a group of people. So if the individuals in a group, if the individuals in a given society are dharmic, that society also becomes dharmic and vice versa. This is quite evident from the ups and downs our history has had. We can see it for ourselves. So there can very well be a higher ethics or morality of the future. In fact, this is what the great Swami Vivekananda dreamt of. He was not only dreamt of, he was sure of it. He was sure that Vedanta would be the future religion of the world, and the higher ethics and morality of the future would be based on the spiritual truths of Vedanta. To say it all in one line, Swami Vivekananda dreamed of a humanity where people recognized one another's divinity and lived according to that recognition. It is only when people begin to look upon each other as representations of God Himself that ethics and morality will have reached their highest point. The Vedas have revealed to us the highest ideal, that is perfection, spiritual perfection. And in every age, what are our ethical codes? They're only partial expressions of that highest ideal. With reference to that ideal of perfection, our personal and social codes can and have to be modified. They have to be approximated progressively and probably indefinitely. I'll repeat it once more. The Vedas reveal to us the highest ideal, and our ethical and moral codes are only partial expressions of that ideal. So, with the change of time and circumstance, these social codes will have to be modified progressively. And I said probably indefinitely, because there can be no end to perfection. This is why the Vedic rishis said dharma is nothing fixed. It is progressive. It does change from age to age. Every yuga has its own yuga dharma. So, if we just turn the pages of human history, we can see for ourselves how far humanity has progressed, how much our ideas of God have changed, how much our ideas of ourselves have changed, how our forms of worship, that is, the ways we approach God, have changed as a result of these. How far we have come from our earlier positions in social and religious matters. I'll give you just 2 or 3 instances. One of the ways of worship in earlier times was through animal sacrifice. But nowadays, it is not so popular. It is becoming rare and rare. It is not as commonplace as it was before. But does it mean that we have become less religious? In fact, it is the opposite. We have become more religious, more spiritual. That is why these forms of worship have almost ceased to exist. Animal sacrifices. How brutally criminals used to be punished for small crimes. Their hands used to be chopped off. Their legs used to be chopped off. They used to be put to death over small things. But now, they are also treated like human beings. They are given plenty of chances for reforming themselves. And in how many bad ways we used to treat our lower classes. These are all fast becoming things of the past. And for all that, we haven't become less spiritual. On the contrary, we have become more dharmic and more spiritual. So it does prove that dharma progresses. But the question is, does it never deteriorate once having made a certain progress? Will it never regress? I would say dharma is mostly progressive, though the path of progress does have its ups and downs. We are climbing, but we are also stumbling and falling now and then. But on the whole, the journey of dharma has been upward and forward. Dharma does deteriorate when society becomes degenerate. This Krishna has already said in the Bhagavad Gita. Dharma comes down when society falls on evil times. The Puranas famously talk about the cow of Dharma. They say the cow of Dharma once walked on 4 legs, but in this present Kali Yuga, it stands only on 1 leg. This is the traditional view of things. Maybe the authors of these words, these Puranas, lived in bad times, times of war and social disruption, when the general standard of morality went down. For that matter, we have even now the heritage of those evil times, no doubt about it. With so many wars going on all around us. But just as we have surely progressed in certain departments of life, as I just mentioned, we have also surely deteriorated from our earlier position in certain other departments. Now, in our present world, there are plenty of occasions that demand an amount of self-sacrifice from all members of society. But this self-sacrifice is very hard to see. In matters of social unity, sometimes you felt when you read about ancient societies, how these societies, these social groups were based on principles of cooperation. But now our society is based on competition. In earlier times, weaker sections of society would, weaker sections means, economically disadvantaged sections of society. Such people would be cared for in much better ways than now. Now they are left to fend for themselves. So in matters like self-sacrifice, social solidarity, and treatment of disadvantaged sections of society, in these matters, we seem to have come down. But then, what we have to take into account while judging these things is, see, first, let us again remind ourselves that we here are not historians or sociologists. We are religious people, followers of Dharma. We have to take into account one important thing, and that is the silent, unperceived work of an incarnation of God. This only great acharyas, great prophets like Shankaracharya or Swami Vivekananda can understand. And they have a completely different view of things. Swamiji had no doubt that humanity is now again standing on the very threshold of Satya Yuga, the golden age, or the age of pure spirituality. So it could very well be that we are on the brink of a rise. We are, how to say that? Vivekananda used to say, when you see a hollow, you always know that a crest will follow it. Maybe we are now standing in one such position. So if there is no end to the progress of Dharma, is there no limit to perfection? To repeat, The progress of dharma means our progress towards divine perfection. So, how can we set limits to it? Humanity is still comparatively young. It was, so to speak, it was only the other day that we humans appeared on the earth with our little notions of right and wrong. Who knows for how many years our earth has rolled on its axis before we humans came into existence. And we don't know how many more millions of years it is going to revolve. We don't know, we have no idea what marvels God is going to produce yet. What was thought impossible 1,000 years ago has become possible now in the scientific world with the help of technology. Similarly, what is impossible now for the ordinary person in the moral sphere, what is impossible for us now because of our weaknesses of the flesh, may very well become possible for an entire race 1,000,000 years from now. It is not at all far-fetched, because the truth, when we look at human history, this is what we see. There has been tremendous advancement. These are the facts. Sometimes truth is bewildering. It is far more bewildering than we can imagine. If we seriously contemplate on these truths, if we take hard facts and examine them, it is enough to take us out of our little systems of morals and metaphysics. The Shastras teach us that the pursuit of truth, wherever it may lead, whatever sacrifices it may involve, is indispensable to human progress. That is why the religion of the Vedas and Upanishads has never opposed scientific progress, never opposed speculation in ethics and metaphysics. So the last page of Vedantic ethics is not yet written and probably will never be written. If only we have eyes to see, a new chapter is being added to it in our own lifetime. What I have in mind is this Vedantic ethics of Swami Vivekananda. But let's not open that subject now. But I hope our exploration of truth and truthfulness as cardinal virtues, at least that has given us an idea of their ramifications, their wide-ranging branches, Verzweigungen. We now pass on to the last and most important of the cardinal virtues, that is non-injury, ahimsa. It is said, ahimsa is the basic moral duty. The basic moral duty. It is glorified as the mother of all virtues. Ahimsa and satya, non-injury and truthfulness. These happen to be the sovereign virtues emphasized by all religious Hindus, from the Vedic seers down to Mahatma Gandhi. But there is an oft-quoted Sanskrit saying which holds ahimsa to be the supreme. It is higher than truth itself. Ahimsa paramo dharma, which means non-injury is the highest law. And this ahimsa, just like truth includes many other virtues, ahimsa includes qualities like gentleness, courtesy, kindness, hospitality, and of course, love. Gentleness, courtesy, kindness, hospitality, and love. All other virtues, even truthfulness, the sages say they are to be practiced to the extent that they don't clash with ahimsa. That is how highly ahimsa is held. Never speak an unpleasant truth or a hurtful truth. There is no need of it. Yes, truthfulness is very important, but ahimsa is more important. And without doubt, this gospel of ahimsa is Hinduism's most remarkable contribution to world culture. Hinduism has always taught that one should return good for evil. It doesn't stop with saying non-resistance. It says you should positively return good for evil. There are scores of passages in books like Mahabharata that show that this has been the teaching of the rishis from time immemorial. But the love of the rishis, of these great sages, was not limited to human beings. It extends even to the subhuman world. And this ahimsa, we are now discussing ahimsa as a virtue, as a moral and ethical discipline. As a virtue, it has two sides, a negative side and a positive side. On the negative side, it means refraining, avoiding giving pain to any creature in any way. First of all, one practicing non-injury has to practice tremendous self-restraint. One has to control one's greediness, excessive desire. Then, non-injury also requires control of hatred, because it is feelings of hatred which often impel one to acts of cruelty and violence. One has to be always mentally alert, because in the absence of that mental alertness, one commits acts of greediness, hatred, and cruelty. And lastly, it includes gentleness, that is to say, refraining from rude behavior, refraining from use of harsh words. So, all these make up the negative side of the virtue of ahimsa. It is self-restraint, control of hatred, and avoidance of rude behavior. But on the positive side, ahimsa means perfect love. A follower of ahimsa goes out to all creatures in perfect love. It implies a positive goodwill. He extends his generosity, his friendship. He doesn't, the follower of ahimsa is not satisfied with just not hurting others. He positively does good to others. He is kind to all beings, and they are ever willing, ready for self-sacrifice. These three, goodwill, kindness, and self-sacrifice, these three make up the positive side of ahimsa. But the question is such perfect ahimsa possible at all? Is it possible? That is a difficult question to answer. Perfect ahimsa can only be an ideal. Why I say this is because of just one simple fact of existence, a simple fact of existence, and that is life depends upon life. We all have to kill in order to live. You cannot avoid that. We can only do our very best, make the best approximation to the ideal in practice. Now we see why the Vedic rishis were careful not to lay down one uniform law for all sections of community. They teach the ideal of non-violence, and the people also accept it. But the rishis also allow people, whether as individuals or as social groups, to reach that high ideal in their own time, as and when they acquire the necessary moral strength, when they grow competent for that. Because much depends upon swadharma, one's own inner nature. As we already heard, a soldier's duty is different from a monk's. It all depends on the duty. Swadharma as duty depends on swadharma as one's inner nature. So a soldier has to take up arms in order to uphold dharma, whereas the monk has to lay down his life for the same purpose. When there is a confusion of duties, then the larger dharma suffers. And this, the rishis were careful to point out in their teachings. There is much misunderstanding with regard to India as the land of ahimsa. Many people think ahimsa in India is not just an individual or a class virtue. It is, as far as India is concerned, ahimsa is a national virtue, or so it should be. India has to be non-violent, whatever may happen in other parts of the world. Of course, it can be justifiably said that ahimsa is the national virtue of India, because though it is practiced, or it can be practiced only by small sections of people, it has definitely considerably influenced the Hindu community as a whole. We may even say that it has made Hindus what they are today. Most of their virtues, but not only their virtues, most of their vices or weaknesses, everything can be traced to the ahimsa ideal. The mildness, their hospitality, their humanity, their horror of bloodshed, their abhorrence of killing, their kindness to animals, all these are due to the ideal of non-violence. The pacific character of the Hindu people is a result of this ideal. Even foreign observers say that the Indian people, in spite of their terrible poverty, are more hospitable. They are far less brutal than the general masses in other countries. If that is a fact, then it is due to the ahimsa practiced by the masses. But there is another side to this picture. I just made an observation. I said, most of the Hindus' virtues and their vices can be traced to this ideal of ahimsa. There's no notion of difference between non-violence and weakness. One thing we must remember, ahimsa is only for the brave and strong. It is for those who can strike but will not, for those who can strike but will not. To run away from a brute and then to call it non-violence there can't be a worse form of self-deception. What the ideal of non-violence requires is to replace brute force with spiritual strength. It doesn't mean we have to substitute bravery with the cowardice. If I can't use spiritual strength, it is either because I don't have it myself, or because my adversary, my opponent, doesn't have a spark of humanity in him. Then it is my duty to use physical force to defend myself and what is valuable to me. It is ridiculous for a lamb to have ideals of ahimsa when the wolf thinks differently. So in a world like ours, where people still resort to brute force to get what they want, where nations try to settle their quarrels by means of arms, ahimsa in the hands of those who are not competent, for those who have not the fitness for it, it can only result in unmanliness. And Vivekananda was very quick to point out that this lack of manliness, this is the parent of many sins. This is also the very first lesson that Krishna teaches in the Gita. You can read it for yourself. Swami Vivekananda has warned us again and again that weakness is sin. It is not non-violence. So that brings to a close our brief discussion of the 5 cardinal virtues of Hinduism: purity, self-control, detachment, truth, and non-injury. I would have liked to give you a quick resume of all these that we studied, but I see I've already run out of time. Maybe I'll make this resume the introduction for our next class.